Okay, we are on Yud Tes Amud Aleph at the Mishnah, right in the middle of the page, 1982. Some people will watch it on the video. Okay, Beishamei Omer Mevim Shlamim Vein Sobchim Aleihem. You could bring a korban shlamim on Yantif because we're allowed to eat from a korban shlamim. Part of the meat is eaten. The Ein Somchim Aleihem, but you're not allowed to do smicha. Smicha is leaning on the animal. So Rashi says smicha is forbidden because, as a rabbinic reason, because you have to lean with all of your might. And it's like you're using a living creature for something, but we'll learn later on that you're not allowed to, for example, ride on an animal. So Rashi says smicha is forbidden midrabanan because you're putting all your weight on it and it's like riding. Avolo olos, but you're not allowed to bring a korban ola because a korban ola is all burned on the mizbech and no one eats from it. So the only malachos we're allowed to do on Yantif is malachos related to eating. So for a korban shlamim that we do eat part of the korban shlamim, you're allowed to bring, but for a korban ola not. Ubeitza omer mevim shlamim ve'olos v'somchelim. Beisol says you're allowed to bring a korban shlamim, which we are allowed to eat from, a korban ola, which we're not allowed to eat from, and you're allowed to do smicha on the animals. Now, we're going to talk about there's several different types of karbanos going on here. There are some animals that are brought because of the holiday. So the korban chagiga and the olas re'iyah. So when we ola l'regel and the olas re'iyah for being seen in Yerushalayim, that's a korban ola. The korban chagiga is an animal that you bring, and that's a shlamim, you eat from part of it. Then there's other korbanos. Now we're not talking about korban Pesach because everyone had to bring korban Pesach erev Pesach, but let's say we call them nedarim and nedavos. So nedarim and nedavos are certain obligatory korbanos or korbanos that you pledge to bring. So those are not related to the holiday, but because most people didn't live in Yerushalayim, it was convenient for them to bring korbanos around the time of the holidays when they would come to Yerushalayim. So we have to keep in mind these different types of korbanos because some of these korbanos will be completely forbidden. Some of them might be permitted or forbidden, and some might be the machlokas between Beisham and Beisol. So Gemara, Amar Ula, machlokas Beisham chagiga lismoch va'olas re'iyah likarev. The machlokas in the Mishnah is to bring a korban shlamim of the chagiga. So the chagiga, yeah.
Sorry, general question.
Sure.
Allowed for bringing
A shliach?
Yeah.
Well,
But people didn't go to Jerusalem except maybe, a few times a year,
right, for the Yamim Tovim.
To go.
Right. So even if they didn't go every year, well, we'll see also, the Gemara will discuss that there is a time frame. If you make a pledge for Nedarim and Nedavos, there is a time limit where you have to bring it by. It's through, but we'll see that it's a machlokas tanaim. It's 3 regalim, but the question is it any 3 regalim, or does it follow Pesach Shavuos Sukkos? So the Torah wasn't making people go out of their way, but we're going to see that there is a time limit, and they will be able to bring it on one of the Yom Tovim. Now, if you lived far away, you didn't have to come to, let's say, for Pesach, but then you'd have to bring Pesach Sheni. So you're going to have to come at some point.
But
For some,
one person could, let's say they live up in Nahariya,
right, I understand.
Haifa, whatever.
Right. So,
What? Yeah.
I mean, if you have to do smicha on it, you probably wouldn't be able to schlep the animal all the way there. So that's why people would buy animals. They'd go to Yerushalayim and buy the animals there. So that wouldn't really work because if you had to do smicha, which for let's say certain, well, let's say a yoletis, a woman who had a baby, she's going to have to go at some point herself. Certain tumos that people had, or mitzvah, we'll read in this week's parsha, you have to do it yourself. But even a voluntary korban, part of you bringing a good voluntary korban is doing smicha. You're not going to be able to have someone else do smicha for you. Can't have someone put tefillin on for you. So, I mean, you can have someone bring a donation for you, but not really bring the korban. The only thing is that we've mentioned many times that there is some degree of shlichus in regard to the korbanos tzibor, but the communal korban, but you paid into it with the half shekel, before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and the groups who would come, the mamados, would daven on behalf of all Yisrael that the korban that's being offered today and this week, whatever, should be accepted on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael. So from that perspective, well, it's not a shliach because you're a partial owner of the korban because it's a communal korban, everyone contributes towards it, and so not usually. Okay, so Amar Ula Machlokes b'Sham b'Chagiga Lismach v'Olas Re'el Likarev. The Machlokes is only regard to the Korban Shlamim that you bring because of the holiday. So Chagiga is the name of the Shlamim. So you bring when you're Ola L'Regel, you bring a Korban Shlamim and you eat part of it. So that's to celebrate from the Yantif. And the Olas Re'ia, a Korban Ola that you. So the Machlokes is, can you do smicha on the Shamei Chagiga? But according to Beis Shammai, you're allowed to bring that korban, but you're not allowed to lean on it on Yantif. You have to lean on it before Yantif. According to Beis Hillel, you could lean on it and bring it on Yantif. But Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree that you can bring the Shalmei. It's a korban shlamim, so you're eating from it, so it's related to eating on Yantif, so that's okay. The machlok is that Beis Shammai says you're not allowed to lean on it on Yantif. Va'olas re'ia likarev, and they are arguing if you're even allowed to bring the burnt offering that no one could eat from that you bring when you come to Yerushalayim for Ola L'Regel. That according to Beis Hillel, you are allowed to bring that even though you're not eating from it. So why is there a machlokes? The Beis Shammai sabri v'chagos mosol chag Hashem. Beis Shammai opinion hold when the pasuk says you will celebrate for it a celebration to Hashem. Chagiga in olas re'ia lo. You're allowed to bring the korban chagiga that we eat from, but not the burnt offering. Uveis Hillel savri lashem kol Hashem. Anything that's in honor of that's for Hashem because of the holiday. Aval nedarm nedavos divra kol in craven biyom tov. But voluntary korbanos, nedarim or nedavos, everyone holds are not allowed to be brought on Yantif, even if it's a korban shlamim, even if it's a korban that you eat from. Now, I believe the machlok between I think the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says the difference between a neder and a nedava is if one of them is you just pledge I'm going to bring a korban, and the other one is I'm going to bring this animal as a korban. And the difference is if it's this animal, you're going to have to bring that animal, and if something happens to that animal, you're usually going to be obligated to bring another one in its place. Wait, yeah, it gets more confusing if you pledge a specific animal, but that's I don't remember which one's which, but that's the difference between a neder and a dava. I think so. Rashi says. No, Rashi's on something a little bit further. The Rashi says Nedarim and Nedavos, since their time is not related to Yantif at all, you don't have to bring them on Yantif. But even though like let's say there's the machlokas about everyone who comes to Minyan in the morning knows about not saying Tachanun for 6 days after Shavuos. So what's the reason? Because you're allowed to bring the korbanos, the chagiga, and the re'iyah up until 7 days after the first day of Shavuos. So even though you could bring them after Shavuos, but the main thing is to eat them around the Yantif. So you're allowed to bring well, according to Beis Shammai, the chagiga is okay, and according to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, you could bring the chagiga, and according to Beis Hillel, even the chagig, the both the shlamim and the ola on yantif because it's related to yantif. But Nidar and Nidavos have no relation to yantif, so even the korban shlamim that you would donate or voluntarily give, you're not allowed to bring those, even according to Beis Hillel, on yantif. B'chein Amar Rav Ada bar Ava, and similarly Rav Ada bar Ava said, like Ula, Nidar and Nidavos ain't cravim b'yom tov. You're not allowed to bring Nidar and Nidavos on yantif. Meisave, they asked against Ula and Rav Ada bar Ava. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, so Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who's a Tana, said, Lo nechluku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al ola she'eno shel yantif. Beis Shammai Beis Hillel do not argue if it's a korban ola that's not related to yantif. She'eno kreva b'yantif. You're not allowed to bring that on yantif. They all agree that even Beis Hillel agrees you can't bring a korban ola that's not related to yantif and yantif. Val shlamim shehein shel yantiv shekrevim b'yantiv. They don't argue about a shlamim, which we get to eat from, a peace offering that's related to the yantif, meaning the shamei chagiga, that shekrevim b'yantiv. You are allowed to bring that korban on yantif. Amen. What's the machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel? Al ola shehi shel yom tov, yal shlamim she'enu shel yom tov. The olas re'iyah, Beis Shammai says no, Beis Hillel says yes, but also yal shlamim she'enu shel yom tov, a korban shlamim that's not related to yom tov. Beis Shammai omrim lo yavi. Beis Shammai says you can't bring them, but Beis Hillel omrim yavi, and Beis Hillel says you are allowed to bring it. So here we have a brisa that says that Beis Hillel hold that you are allowed to bring a shlamim even if it's not related to the yantif, which would mean a neder and a dava. That's a shlamim. So that does not fit. So the way Ula explained our Mishnah is not in consonance with that brisa. So tritzvi mahachi. So the Gemara says that there was a mistake in the transmission of that brisa. The text of that brisa is not accurate. So we have to fix the gersa, the text of that brisa, and say this is what the brisa really says. Rabbi Shimon Elazar. Rabbi Shimon Elazar says, "So nechleku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel olo shlamim she'enu shel yantiv she'en krevim shel yantiv." Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel don't argue about an ola and a shlamim that are not related to yantiv. The original text was only about ola, but ola and shlamim that's not related to yantiv she'en krevim b'yamtov. So according to this, so we're fixing the gersa to fit with what Ula said, that even Beis Hillel agrees that a korban that you eat from, a korban shlamim, but if it's not the holiday korban, you're not allowed to bring it on yantif. Yal shlamim shehim shel yom tov, shekrevim b'yom tov, or any korban shlamim which is related to yantif that even Beis Shammai agrees you are allowed to eat that at yom tov. Amen. What are they arguing about? Al ola shehi shel yom tov shebeis Shammai omer lo yavi v'sel omer yavi. The only machlokus is about the burnt offering of the olas re'iyah for coming to Yerushalayim for the regal. Beis Shammai says you can't since you don't eat from it, and Beis Hillel says you are allowed to bring it. So we fixed that brisa to accord with Ula. Rav Yosef gives a different answer. Tnai shekalta me'alma. Are you taking a Tana out of the world? Is there no other opinion that Ula could find with this could be a true brisa, and Ula doesn't accord with that brisa, but maybe there's a different brisa that Ula does accord with, and there is. Rabbi Yosef is about to tell us. The tnai, there's a machlokas tanaim. The tnai because we're into the brisa. Shlamim haboy machmas yom tov b'yom tov. Shlamim, which are coming because of yantiv on yantiv. For example, the korban chagiga. Beis Shammai omrim somech alem erev yom tov v'shochem b'yom tov. Beis Shammai says you do smich on them before yantif, and you're able to shech them and bring them on yantif. Beis Hillel omrim somech alem b'yom tov v'shochem b'yom tov. You're allowed to lean on them on yantif and shech them on that day. Return to Yud Tesamid Beis. The brisa continues. Aval nadar menadavos tivrakol and crave it b'yom tov. But nadar menadavos, according to everyone, even Beis Hillel agrees you're not allowed to bring them on yantif. So there is a machlokas or there is a brisa that holds that Beis Hillel forbids bringing non-holiday related shlamim on Yantif. So so this fits in with what Ula said, but the brisa about Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar does not fit with Ula. But there's two different opinions of Tanaim, so Ula fits in with one, but not with that first brisa that we quote. Bahana tnai ki hai tnai, and these Tanaim are arguing about something that these other Tanaim already argued about. The Tanya, because we went to the brisa. Ein mevian Toda b'chagamatos minei chametz Shabbat. So again, people come to davening every day in the morning. No, we don't say Mizmor Lasoda on Erev Pesach. Why don't we say Mizmor Lasoda? Because as we saw in Parshas Tzav, the Korban Toda, the Thanksgiving Korban, included chametz menachos, offerings of flour that are fried a certain way. They are chametz, and on Erev Pesach, we can only eat chametz part of the day. So there's a principle we're not going to do something to limit the time of eating karbanos, to cut the time short. So we don't bring a korban tamid, a korban toda on Erev Pesach, because you would only be able to eat it until the time that chametz is prohibited. Now Rashi says the fourth hour. Now the fourth hour is midrabana, because midiraisa, from the pasuk of the word ach, that ach on the first day you have to destroy the chametz tashbisu. So the Gemara in Pesachim says ach splits the day up. That the second half of the day from chatzos on you're not allowed to have chametz. You have to destroy it by then. And then the Chachamim added two different things. And the Brisker Rav, there's a famous Brisker Rav, and Rev Greenberg, who was the Rosh Hashanah, now he's the Nasi of Keren B'Yavneh. He mentioned this in almost every shir klal he gave before Pesach. He would mention this Brisker Rav, that the Brisker Rav says that the halacha is that that when the Gemara says Ochen Kol Arba, you could eat chametz for 4 hours, but V'tolin Kol Chamesh, it hangs in abeyance in the 5th hour. You don't eat it, but you don't have to destroy it. V'sorfim Techil Sheish, you burn it at the beginning of the 6th hour. So if I remember correctly, so the Brisker Rav holds that the 5th hour, that even though we add 2 hours on to strengthen the diraisa, because to make a fence around the diraisa, we make fences. So in case it's a cloudy day and you're not exactly sure when midday is, we add 2 hours beforehand that you're not allowed to eat chametz in order to make sure you're not eating chametz after the midday. But the Brisker Rav says it's different. The 5th hour, you're not allowed. It's the person isn't allowed to eat. It's an isser on the gavra, on the person. Excuse me, it's an isser on the which way does he say? I didn't look at it recently. So one of them is that the person is not allowed to eat chametz, and the other hour is that the chametz is already prohibited at that time. But for the hour that the person's not allowed to eat it, the chametz isn't prohibited yet, but we're being strict. So I think that's the earlier hour. So the hour next to noon is we're saying that chametz itself is prohibited that hour, and the hour before we're saying the chametz isn't prohibited yet, but the person isn't allowed to eat it. But whatever, it's to strengthen us not by mistake eating it by noon. We add on these things. So it's just a little interesting that Rashi, I thought it's a little interesting that Rashi uses the Rabbanan Zman. Where does he say it? Rashi says it somewhere. Oh, it's later on. The Gemara is going to analyze this brisa later on. And what's interesting about it is that there is a principle. It's not absolute, but Ein Shvus b'Mikdash. The Rabbanans don't apply in the Mikdash. Oh, so that's not a problem because the non-Kohen no. The loaves, I think, are only eaten by the Kohanim, but they would they would be able to eat it outside the Beis Hamikdash. But within the Beis Hamikdash itself, we don't have to worry about the D'Rabbanans. But because they can take it outside, so we are worried about the D'Rabbanans, and they can't eat it even from the 4th hour. Okay. So we don't bring a korban toda on Pesach because it has chametz in it. The low bat teres mipnei shu yantif. We're not allowed to bring a korban toda on Shavuos because it's a yantif. Avomevi adam todaso b'chag hasukos. But you're allowed to bring a toda on Sukkos. Rabbi Shimon Omer harehu Omer b'chag hamatzos b'chag hashavos b'chag hasukos. Rabbi Shimon says the pasuk in Re'eh 3 times a year, all of your males must be seen the face of Hashem your God, in the place that He is chosen, the Chag HaMatzos, v'Chag HaShavuos, v'Chag HaSukkos, on the holiday of Matzos, the holiday of Shavuos, holiday of Sukkos, v'Loyeres Panai Reikam. You cannot be seen with my face empty. So you have to bring korbanos when you come. So Kol Sheba b'Chag HaMatzos, b'Chag HaShavuos. Any korban which can be brought on Pesach can be brought on Shavuos, u'v'Chag HaSukkos and on Sukkos. If you can't bring a certain korban on Pesach, you can't bring it on Shavuos or Sukkot either. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omer, a third opinion in the Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says maybe Adam Tadaso b'Chag HaSukkos v'yotzi ba yedei chavaso mishum simcha ve'en yotzi ba mishum chagiga. A person can bring a korban toda on Sukkot. He fulfills his obligation of simcha. So Rashi points out, we saw this a while ago when we learned Psachim, that the Gemara says is that when there's an obligation of simcha on Yantif, we fulfill that through eating meat of korbanos. So it's not clear that nowadays, when we don't have korbanos, that you eat regular meat to have simcha. Rashi here says, so when you eat that meat, you fulfill the simcha, but it doesn't count as bringing a korban chagiga. And Rashi says, because since you have an obligation, so to bring a korban toda, so when you survive 4 difficult situations, you're obligated to bring a korban toda. So the chagiga has to be a voluntary. You're just bringing it because of the holiday, because this korban is brought because either you were freed from jail, or you crossed the sea, or you crossed the desert, or you were very ill and you recovered, so you have an obligation to bring it, so it can't count as the korban chagiga. The korban chagiga has to be something just because of the chag, and the korban toda isn't just because of the chag. So when you eat it, you fulfill your simcha, but it doesn't count as bringing a korban chagiga. So the Tanakama here says, it's probably Alan. He hasn't choose. Moshe Feinstein seems to have an opinion in many things, not just in regard to this. Moshe Feinstein has an opinion that it's forbidden to induce labor, because labor is it's a sakana, it's danger, and you can't put yourself into the sakana. So, I don't know if now personally, from experiences that I know of firsthand and not firsthand, labor inductions are not a slam dunk by any means, and a lot of them don't succeed, and you have to have a C-section anyway. So he's not wrong that it's not such a great experience for the mother to be induced anyway, but and then so Moshe Feinstein seems we don't want to bring in put yourself in a medical situation. So, and and to the extent that he says, if you're not able to fast on Yom Kippur, you have to try to fast. And then if you're fainting, whatever, then you could put in an IV, even though to put in the IV on Yantif is an Avera, but for Refuah, you need to do it. You have to be Mechalal Yom Kippur but should you put the IV in before Yom Kippur so you won't need to put it in Yom Kippur? Moshe Feinstein says no. Now Rav Aaron Soloveitchik held that dafka, if you're not going to be able to fast, you should put it in the IV before Yom Kippur, and you can fast in Yom Kippur, and then you don't have to worry about that later. So it seems from those two psakim, and now from a single swallow does not a spring make, but it seems that Moshe Feinstein is not a fan of inducing voluntary medical. He's not opposed to medical intervention, but you shouldn't go looking to do the medical intervention before it's needed. So even though you might think it's better to put the IV in before Yom Kippur because it's that there's no malacha to put it in before Yom Kippur, but it seems that okay, so there's also other cases where Moshe Feinstein talks about, but this one I'm not as I haven't looked at this one in a long time. A voluntary cosmetic surgery that was going to help a young woman get a shidduch. He was not too in favor of it. But again, so voluntary medical situation, Moshe Feinstein was very much against. Now, I don't know macro if it's one shita that we see it in different cases, but he doesn't. It could be that he holds that when the Torah gives a doctor permission to heal, that's when someone is sick and needs to be healed, and then you don't do things voluntary in case where you don't need the. Like if I want him to poke me, there is a small element of chavala. He is making me lose a little bit of blood, even if I am mochalet. I'm saying I'm not sure that is actually Moshe Feinstein's shita, that it's this macro thing, and that's why he doesn't allow these different things, these different situations. But the point is that the husband is not in danger. So he has no obligation to bring a Torah. He wasn't saved from danger. A woman is in a dangerous situation, but the korban. So I mean, my father's mentioned all this. He mentioned it the other day in the morning about the medrash that's saying that she has to bring a korban because she took a false vow. That's not the pshat of the pasuk. That's what the medrash says. You could say that, but what she did isn't a korban Torah, but she went through a situation. It's the way the Torah presents it. In this week's parsha is that certain tumos require a korban in order for the tuma to be concluded, including saras, including a zav, a yoledes. Certain tumos you need to bring a korban in order to stop the tuma or to become tahor again. So even though she went through a dangerous process of labor, the korban isn't a korban Torah. You could say that she is thankful for it, but I mean, but the pashtus has nothing to do with that. If you want to make a drasha, you can make a drasha, but I don't think it's not the reason for it. There's in one of the kinos, it's based on a medrash that one of these super rich people of Yerushalayim, I think like every day on her kid's birthday, she promised the amount of gold equal to the weight of her kid to the Beis HaMikdash. And then she couldn't, and then when they were starving because there was no food in the siege of Yerushalayim, she ended up eating her baby or something. Lo aleinu. So and then that we'll talk about in the Tochacha and Bechukosai, according to the Ramban. But the point is that if to thank Hashem, there are different ways you could bring a korban to thank Hashem as a voluntary korban. You could bring a monetary offering, like we mentioned, but there's no obligation to bring a korban Torah. Korban Torah is surviving those four things we mentioned: getting out of jail, recovering from serious illness, or crossing the river, or the ocean or the desert. I think those are the four. So from this three-way machlokas here, we see that according to Rabbi Shimon Elazar, you can't bring any of these korbanos on Pesach, Shavuos, or Sukkot. So the Gemara is just saying that just like we saw a different machlokas if you're allowed to bring non yantif related korbanos that are shlamim, according to Beis Hillel, yes or no. It also works out according to this other brisa. It happens to also be on that point. What is this good or not good? Okay. Okay, so we're going to analyze this. So we're at the top of the second column on Yud Tesla on 19b1. What's the problem? Please. Amar Mar, we said, Ein Mavin Toda b'Chag HaMatzos M'nei Chametz, but you're not allowed to bring a korban Toda on Pesach because it has chametz in it. Pshita, of course you can't. There's chametz. So Amar Avada Brei Rav Yitzchak v'Amilo Rav Shmuel Bar Abba Hacha B'Arba Sar Askinan. This is talking about the 14th on Erev Pesach. The Kasavar Ein Mavin Kachim LeBeis Absul, and we hold that you're not allowed to bring korbanos into an early to be puzzled before their time. So because you're cutting off the time, you can only eat it through the fourth hour, the chametz. You're cutting off time, and it's going to become noser prematurely. We don't want that, so that's why we're not. So when he said Pesach, I meant Erev Pesach. So according to this svara of, okay, so I'll turn off the fan. That ein mevin kachel beis hapsul, it should end up that you wouldn't be allowed to bring a korban shlamim, let's say on Erev Yom Kippur, or maybe even the day before Erev Yom Kippur. Well, no, maybe not the day. So let's just say an Erev Yom Kippur, because if you could eat it for 2 days, you can't eat it on Yom Kippur. So according to that, I'm just saying it would follow, and you'd have to look if the Rambam says is if the Gemara brings it somewhere else, you wouldn't be allowed to bring, let's say, a korban shlamim on Erev Yom Kippur, because you're not allowed to eat it from when Yom Kippur starts. So the second clause was you're not allowed to bring a korban toda on Shavuos. The Gemara and the Mishnah always calls when it says Atzeres, the assembly, it means Shavuos because it's a yantiv. Kasav nedar nedavos ain't craven b'yomtiv. This holds that you're not allowed to bring voluntary korbanos on Yom Tov. So even according to Beis Hillel, even though you're allowed to eat from this korban, you're not allowed to bring it on Yom Tov. Aval maybe adam todas b'chagasukos, but a person is allowed to bring a korban toda on Sukkot, emas. When on Sukkot? If you're talking about Yom Tov of Sukkot itself, and that would also apply to Shmini Atzeres, you just said on the previous clause, half a line before, that you can't bring the korban toda on Shavuos because it's Yom Tov. The first day of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres is also Yom Tov, so you obviously couldn't bring it on those days of Yom Tov. We already know that from the second clause. So what's he adding that you can't bring it on Sukkot? But he means even, excuse me, but you're allowed to bring it on Sukkot. He means on Cholamoid of Sukkot, you're allowed to. Okay, so that's the three clauses of the Tanakama. The second Tana of this brisa was Rabbi Shimon Omer, Hareyu Omer b'chag hamatzos b'chag hashavos b'chag hasukos, as we turn to 19b2. The pasuk talks about, mentions explicitly Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And therefore he learns. Anything that could be brought on Pesach is allowed to be brought on Shavuos and Sukkot. And something which you're not allowed to bring. You want a cup, you can bring a cup also. If you're not allowed to bring it on Pesach, you're not allowed to bring it on Shavuos and Sukkot either. Why? Why can't you bring the korban toda on Cholamoid of Sukkot? Masking for Reb Zera. Reb Zera didn't ask against this. Hashta salosi misaltinan. We're allowed to even gather firewood. Is there any question that you're allowed to bring a korban, a voluntary korban? There's no reason why you shouldn't be allowed to bring the korban on Cholamoid. So Amar Abaye says, Rabbi Shimon agrees that you're allowed to bring a korban toda on Cholamoid Sukkos. So why does it say you're not allowed to bring it? What are they arguing about? To put upon him the losa, say the negative commandment of Baal Ta'achir. You can't delay the korban and bring it too late. We were talking about the car dealerships. We will serve no meal before it's time or something. Some ad from the 70s or something. My father quoted. We will serve no something before it's time. So, yeah, we will serve no wine. Whatever it is. So there's a halacha about the acher. If you pledge to bring a korban, you have to bring it within 3 regalim. So there's this machlokes and this tanaim that Rabbi Shimon and the Tanakh are arguing about is when we say 3 regalim, does it just mean the immediate next 3 regalim? Or we're going to learn, the Gemara is going to say 3 regalim starting from a certain regal. So you might actually have 5 regalim, depending on when. So I think the main sugya for this is in the first paragraph of Rosh Hashanah, but obviously the Gemara is talking about it here. So the Tanakama Savar, the Tanakama holds Shalosh Regalim Amar Rachmana. The pasuk says that you should bring a korban within 3 Yamim Tovim of pledging it. Afilu close kisidra. So it doesn't matter the order. If you promised it in the summertime, you have Sukkot and Pesach and Shavuos to offer it. If you offered it in the wintertime, you have Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot to offer it. If you gave it during the Omer, you have Shavuos, Sukkot, and Pesach to offer it. So whatever you have 3 regalim to bring it. Whether the 3 regalim end up giving you 7 months, whether they give you extra time, you pledge it. So you have 3 regalim to bring it, and if you don't bring it within then you violate of delaying bringing a korban. Rabbi Shimon says kisidron in. It's only if you go through the order of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Shalo kisidron lo. So if you didn't bring it, so let's say you promised it in the summertime. You pledged it. You said, I'm going to bring a korban in the summertime. So Sukkot was the first regal, but the clock doesn't start yet. The clock of the 3 regalim always starts at Pesach. So the longest time, according to Rabbi Shimon, you could have to bring a korban is if you promised it right after Pesach. So you have Shavuos to bring it. And the next Sukkot, and the following Pesach, because that's really when the clock for Baal Ta'achar starts with Pesach, and then another Shavuos and another Sukkot before you violate Baal Ta'achar. So the Gemara originally said that the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon and Elazar was dependent on the machlokas of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Are you allowed to bring a korban that you can eat from, but it's not related to Yantif on Yantif? And now we're saying no, this has nothing to do with it. The machlokas is only about when you violate Baal Ta'achar for not bringing the korban within 3 regalim. And then Rabbi Shimon Omer, that was a plain Rabbi Shimon. Then the third opinion is Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon says, maybe Adam Todos of Chagasukos, you can bring a korban Toda on Sukkot, Amos, when during Sukkot, if he's talking about bringing it on, can I drink from the bottle? Want me to put a little bit more in your cup first? No, you're empty, so in case you're thirsty. Rabbi saying you bring it on Chol Hamoed. We already explained that the Tanakama already says you're allowed to bring a korban tamid on Chol Hamoed Sukkot. Ela b'Yom Tov, so he must hold you're allowed to bring it even on Yantif. Except when Nidar was craving b'Yom Tov, and he holds that even voluntary korbanos can be brought on Yantif, which is actually the lenient opinion of Beis Hillel, like we said according to some Tanaim. U'ma'ishta chagasukos denakat. So why did he use Sukkot to tell us that you could bring Nidar Minadavos on Yantif? Why did he specifically give this as the example? Rabbi Shimon Latameh, because it follows a different shita that he has. The Tanya, because we're in the Brayso, Rabbi Shimon Omer lo yomer chagasukos sheba kaz medaber. So when the pasuk there says the chagamatzos chagashavuos v'chagasukos, the pasuk there is already talking about Sukkot. We just read it on the last day of Yantif. We talked about Pesach. We talked about the period of Omer and Shavuos, and then at the end Sukkot. So the whole paragraph in the Torah is already talking about Sukkot. So why does it have to mention the holiday of Sukkot if we're already talking within the context of Sukkot? Lama Namar. So why does it pasuk explicitly mention Sukkot? Lamer shezeh achron. to teach us that this is always the last holiday of the when you have to mention when you have to bring the korban within the three holidays. Sukkot is the last korban, is the last holiday, meaning you have the clock starts at Pesach and then Shavuos and then Sukkot. Rabbi Shimon says Lomer shezeh gorei. No, it's not that's the last one. It's that not bringing it on Sukkot is actually causes that's the lahavdil, the shot clock violation. When Sukkot it ends and you didn't, that is so he has a different shita. He holds even if three holidays didn't pass by, but it has to be brought by the nearest Sukkot. So even if you offered it, it seems, according to him, if I'm understanding this correctly, yeah. If you offered it if you promised it in the summer, so after Shavuos, so Sukkot is the first holiday that comes afterwards, you have to bring it by Sukkot. So whereas Rabbi Shimon Lazar and this Tanakama held that the three regalim always start at Pesach, and you have Pesach and then Shavuos and then Sukkot, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon holds that no, you always have to finish. You have to always have to bring it by the end of Sukkot, even if there's no Pesach and Shavuos beforehand. So so he's being much more strict. You have much less time to bring a korban. It always has to be brought by Sukkot, or also be over Baal Ta'achar, even if Sukkot is the first holiday after you pledge this korban. And I remember, I forgot to mention in regard to what you were asking before about people traveling to Eretz Yisrael. There's a brisa in the second parak of Bava Metzia that there's a contradiction. One brisa says it from the farthest part of Eretz Yisrael to Yerushalayim it took 3 days, and a different brisa says it took 15 days. So to travel before a yanta. So the Gemara gives two explanations. As it says, one is in like Bayis Rishon, one is Bayis Sheni. So one opinion is that in Bayis Rishon it took only 3 days. Everyone was going, so everything flowed fast. And in the second Bayis, it wasn't as safe. There wasn't all Jews everywhere, so they had to camp more often and stuff. So they had to travel in shorter bursts and take rest. So it took them 15 days in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash to get there. And I believe that the other explanation the Gemara gives is the opposite. That when everyone was going in the first Beis Hamikdash, the roads would get too clogged, so it took 15 days. Lahavdil, we see it when there's a hurricane by Florida and they're trying to, everyone's going there, even rush hour, everyone's going the same direction to go slower, not faster. And in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, because it wasn't so easy and not as many people went, they were able to travel quicker. It only took them 3 days, even from the farthest parts of Eretz Yisrael, to get in. That's not what the Gemara mentions, but separately. But this morning I saw a remarkable picture. It's a picture of a soldier, an Israeli soldier in Sahel. It's worth it. I was very inspired by the picture. He has a big backpack on his back, and it's holding the Torah inside. He's carrying the Torah for the soldiers to down laying on. Whoa. For some people are telling, why do they have such a big Torah? They should have a smaller Torah. But I found it very inspiring. And I sent it to Ramosha also. And we say in Vahi bin Aaron, when the Aaron travel, we say Kuma Shem V'Yifut it should knock over the enemies. So it's a kiyum. We should see a kiyum of that. And I said, they're bringing a Torah into Lebanon. And Ramosha responded, well, the parts of Lebanon might be Eretz Yisrael. I'm not denying that. Yes, depending on what the border of Eretz Yisrael. It's not, the Chiddush isn't that they're bringing a Torah into a part that's not Eretz Yisrael. It's that they're going to war and they bring the Torah with them. I was very inspired by that picture. I saw it today. It didn't say. The backpack just says that it's a carrier of a Sefer Torah, and it says the chief army rabbinate. There's the chief rabbinate of the army. Oh, there is some patches on top. There's a friends of the IDF, obviously, help pay for it because there's a friend of the IDF on it. and a couple other patches that I can't see, but
I never gave the thing,
I can't blame you. But also last week's Haftorah, that when David first had them put the Torah on the wagon, that wasn't good. Uzzah got killed for it. They had to be carried on the shoulder. So here's a backpack. So, but it was very it's made me very emotional seeing this picture. It's inspirational. So now the end of the Beitza says when you bring this korban and you eat from the korban on Yantif, or you fulfill your mitzvah of simchas Yantif by eating korban meat on Yantif, and yotze ba mishum chagiga, but you don't fulfill your mitzvah of bringing the korban chagiga. So the Gemara says pshita. Of course not. Davar shebachova you're obligated to bring a korban chagiga. V'chol davar shebachova eno ba el min achulin. And anything which is an obligation must be brought from unsanctified regular stuff. But a Toda is already not necessarily chulin, so you can't. I'm probably saying that in the technically wrong way. So it has to be brought from chulin, from plain money. Rashi says that it can't be brought from Meiser Sheni money, which is already holy, and it can't be from a neder or nedava, which you already have a previous obligation to bring. So it has to be brought without you can't kill two birds with one stone to try to get two korbanos with one korban. So the Gemara says lo tzricha de afagav de parish. So even though when he says I'm going to bring along with my chagiga, I'm going to bring this Toda and get them both together, what he verbally said has no significance. Because this is just like the question Rabbi Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan. If someone says I obligate upon myself a Toda, the chagiga, and I should also fulfill my chagiga obligation with it, or Hareini Nazir, he says I'm going to be a Nazir, and we will turn Va'agalech mimos meiser sheni to Chaf Amad Aleph. When I cut my hair and I have to bring a korban as the process of ending my Nazirus, can I use and I'm going to use my Meiser Sheni money. So even though some Meiser Sheni is from crops, specific crops that were brought, you're allowed to bring by animals and eat that meat as Meiser Sheni meat, but you can even bring korbanos with that, but you're not allowed to use it for a korban that you're obligated for another reason, like a korban for ending your Nazir period, Mahu. Well, so Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan, does this take effect when you make this clause at the beginning? Amarle, Rabbi Yochanan said, "Not reinu yotze." The vow takes effect, but the extra clause, doesn't affect. He doesn't fulfill his chagiga with it, or Nazir reinu megaleach. He does the vow of Nazirus takes a place, but he's not allowed to use the Meiser Sheni money for when he cuts his hair. So there is a halach in general. We learned this at the end of Parshas Maseh, I think, or in Parshas Maseh or Matos, that the halach of tnai, when you make a condition. So you're allowed to make a condition. The Rambam lists 5 principles learned from Heinkot and Lav. You have to, if I do this, then it is. And if I don't do this, then it won't take effect. And it has to be tnai kodol, so you have to mention the clause first. It has to be possible. There's 5 different things. So basically if there was a mistake in the formulation, we paskin that let's say the sale, let's say you were selling your car and you tried to make a condition, but you did something wrong with the condition. We say the car gets sold and the condition is nullified if you made the regular I don't remember if it's an Avnei Nezer or who exactly says it, but the general explanation from the Achronim is that The sale is a sale, and the tnai is an add-on to the sale. So therefore, if you messed up something, you didn't formulate the condition together, it doesn't nullify the sale itself. So the same thing here. Rabbi Yochanan is saying, even though you formulated an extra condition, and that was an impermissible thing, the original vow to bring the korban or to become a nazir, that takes effect, even though this other clause you added doesn't take effect. So it seems to be a similar thing for when you make you improperly make a tnai, any condition, onto a standard transaction, a sale. Okay, how gavradam lahu? There was a person who just said to people who heard him, "Havili abrame azuzi leploni lasi brati." Give 400 zuz to that person, and he's going to marry my daughter. So Amar Rapapa says, so normally you need the person who wants to become married would have to give the money. Now we don't know that this guy wanted to give it, but there's certain halachas that in certain cases, if the woman would say to someone, "Do this for me, and I will become married to you," and then there's a din evet kanani and a din arev. So there is even a case where she would give him money, and if he was an important person, the fact that he accepted a gift from her gave her so much hana that it was enough to be considered that he gave her enough money to be kedushin. So it's possible something had happened, but here he said, "Give him 400 zuz, and give him 400 zuz, and he's going to marry my daughter." So he was dying, it seems. So he was dying. So in order to marry off his daughter, he said this. And normally you need a kinyan. You would need to have an actual kinyan, giving over we give over a pen, but it's just a kli. But there's a halacha that if someone's on their deathbed and they say something, it's the kinyan it's as if there was a kinyan, even though there wasn't a kinyan. But that's something that someone who's about to die, when he says something, it takes effect without a kinyan. Amar Papa says, Abra min shakel. The guy can take the 400 zuz. Ubrarte, in regard to the daughter, Ibai Nasif, if he wants to, he can marry her. Ilabai lo masif. And if he wants to not marry her, he doesn't have to marry her. So the monetary transaction and the kedushin are two separate things, and the money has to be given because that's an independent transaction than the kedushin. Time Adamar Havale Benasif. And the reason is because first he said, give the money to the guy, and he should marry my daughter. But if he says, marry her, and then give him the money, if he will marry her, then he gets the money, and if he doesn't marry, he won't get the money. Yasif Meremar Bekamer Lishmait Mishmei Denafshe. Meremar said and taught the same halacha from himself. He didn't know Rabbi Yochanan taught it. So he said, like, if someone makes a nazar and says that I'm going to be a nazar on condition that the korban that I bring at the end of my naziris is going to come from my Meiser Sheni money. So Meremar said that he is a nazir, but he's not allowed to use the Meiser Sheni money for the korban. So Amarle Ravina Lemremar, Ravina said to Meremar, Atun Hachim Asnisun Lahu. You're teaching this? We already knew this because Rabbi Reish Lakish asked the question of Rabbi Yochanan, and we got this answer from Rabbi Yochanan. So we did have a tradition about this, and so Meremar said a good svara, but if he would have, I'm not criticizing Chas v'shalom, but it was something that other people in the Beis Medrash knew from a tradition from Rabbi Yochanan. So we'll leave it here for Mincha time.